Okay, so let's go. This is the Kubernetes SIG cluster lifecycle cluster API office hours on the 19th of January. Some words. We're abiding to CNCF code of conduct, so please be nice to each other. Please use the raise hands feature if you want to say something about topic. If you have anything you want to talk about, please just add a new topic at the bottom of the agenda. Yeah, you can add yourself to the attendee list here. If you don't have access to the document, you have to join the SIG cluster lifecycle mailing list first, and then you should get an invite. Yeah, I think that should be it. Okay, so let's start. First point, open proposals readout. Do you have anyone who wants to talk about any of those proposals? I'll wait for a minute or two. Okay, not seeing any raised hands. Then I would say let's just go over it. Okay, next point. Do we have anyone new who wants to introduce themselves? Please just unmute yourself and go ahead. Okay, then Fabrizio, you first.
Hi everyone. So a first note with the SIG cluster lifecycle tech lead at. So in Kubernetes every year we do a annual survey, and each SIG is required to provide feedback. And this feedback should be a summary of the feedback of the SIG project. That means that each cluster API provider and cluster API itself should provide this feedback to the SIG lead. In order to do this in a quick and async way, we prepared an annual survey, and each sub-project is expected to nominate a person responsible to fulfill this online form. So this is a PSA for all the provider. Second, this is a request for execution if someone want to take charge of this task for cluster API, feel free to volunteer.
Okay, any comments, concerns, volunteers? Also on Slack, of course, after the meeting. The first link isn't working for me. Let's see.
I will start. Let's do this way. I will start.
No, that's going into my private mailbox. I think you have to fix the link, Fabrizio.
Okay, I will do it. Thank you for noticing this. The link of the form is the one below. This is the link of the email thread in SIG cluster lifecycle. I will start a thread in cluster API channel to see if someone want to do this work. Otherwise, we can do this in a quick Zoom session, or otherwise I will take charge of it for cluster API only.
Yep, I think a Zoom session would be great. I would volunteer to pair. Okay, then I think next topic, Fabrizio again.
Yeah, so V1.1 beta 2 is out, and we're really looking forward to feedback from the community. We are planning RC for next week, and the RC will be cut from a release branch that we are going to create later this week. The actual release, we plan the actual release 2 weeks from now, but this really depends by the kind of feedback that we get from the community. And yeah, also the idea of having a second beta is basically driven by the ambition to give folks time to test, provide feedback, and eventually get the required fix merged in. And yeah, I've said this other time, but if someone needs help in testing or getting started with the release or the new feature like clustered class, feel free to reach out.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. And then I'll continue with the next topic. Just a short PSA. We did a short code walkthrough last week, and we have a YouTube video and a HackMD. So if you want to learn more about API conversions or have some PRs open and you don't know how to fix the tests, there's a HackMD which explains why we need conversions, how it works, and also explains what you have to do. That complicated case here is just for the Kubernetes Bootstrap provider, which essentially needs twice the implementation. So don't worry. Yep. So just for your information that there is some doc here. Okay. Then Arvinder, you're up if you're there. Oh yeah, I see.
Yes. Hi. Hello, everyone. So I just wanted to bring up this proposal. And first of all, thank you to all the people that reviewed it. There were quite a few reviews actually before the holidays, and a few open questions were left. The Google Doc itself became very chatty, so I thought I'd bring them up here. So the first question is really, so one of the questions was that, this proposal is about synchronizing labels that might be placed on a machine deployment that user might want placed on a workload on their worker clusters, worker nodes, basically. So one question was, should we support just arbitrary prefixes versus predefined prefixes? I think for the most part, everybody kind of agreed that we should do predefined prefixes. And these include sort of these really important restricted prefixes, such as node role. So you can actually assign a worker a particular role. And also certain set of prefixes that we would define that were very much cluster API specific. Second 2 points I was hoping we'd have some sort of a discussion on. So one of the questions is, okay, I as a user want to place certain labels that match these prefixes on my worker nodes. Should these labels be inside a brand new field that we define? Let's say at the machine deployment level, at that type, or at the machine type level, versus just having these labels be like all other labels that people apply to their CRs. Any opinions on that would be appreciated.
Yeah, Vince.
So opinions / preferences, like for me, like I think I having thought about this through from a couple of years ago, like having a single prefix that we would sync is probably more in line, like because the prefix would be new, would be in our own domain. So like I think Fabrizio proposed node -restrictions.cluster.xk.io, something like that, which would be in line with what Kubernetes expects as well. And node restriction is like kind of a nice word, the word like it tells you what it's doing. It's like, it's a label for potentially node restrictions or taint and toleration, things like that as well, or node selectors. And we could take ownership over this prefix altogether. We could say like if that the machine is ultimately like the owner for this prefix, and like if we find like extra labels, we'll remove them. Extra labels within this prefix, we'll remove them, and we can add them. So like it will be always a one-way sync rather than like think about like two-way sync, or like what about like if you set node labels within kubeadm, for example? It's like we could just make the rule contract that like we'll take ownership over that domain. Does it make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think that was one of the points in the proposal is, yeah, definitely we could have a cluster API.io, some prefix that we define and only we synchronize. There was also the second point about there are restricted labels within the Kubernetes.io prefix namespace. I think most people agreed that we should support a couple of those as well, and but it sounds like that's okay too, at least based on the feedback I got in the proposal.
So
yeah, on the other two questions, I think like if we do put it on the template, we need to make sure that like the machine deployment doesn't roll out, which we'll have to test. If I remember correctly, it will. So we'll have to think about it. So it should be something that's like done in place in this case.
Right.
Yeah, and yeah, I do agree that like machine controller seems like where that would actually take action. So like the machine controller could check like these node labels and then sync them at every reconciliation.
yes.
Yeah, so two things. The first one, I agree with what Vince said, especially that like even if we do it at the machine controller level, we just have to be wary of like not including those labels in the logic of the rollout. In the past, the kubelet had the same issues with containers, where if something changed in the spec inadvertently, they could roll out with unintended effects. So I think, yeah, if we're introducing some special cases, we really need to be wary and account for those. And the second one regarding regarding the restricted labels, yeah, I agree that that's definitely there's definitely a use case there for Kubernetes cluster operators. We just have to be worried on the way we're doing that, because if we're doing that, for example, through if we decide to not do it through machine controllers and they're directly on the Kubernetes node, but through the kubelet, there might be some restrictions because the kubelet is not able to do things by itself. So depending on the place where we do things, we might face restrictions or not.
Okay. So to the first point, if we make it part of the spec.template, at least in my mind, everything that sort of falls under the template is prone to roll out, right? If the user comes along and they want to now add a new label to it, all of a sudden your template has changed. At least that's my understanding. Is there a precedence where where we allow certain fields to be changed in place within the templates spec.template? Because that's effectively what we would need. We definitely don't want to roll out. We just want the user to be able to arbitrarily change labels in place. Nothing changes except the synchronization logic syncs the labels accordingly.
I have to double check. I could probably follow up on the issue, but I think the labels today will actually be updated in place. Something else that we might want to think about is instead of a new field, should we just reuse the same fields, but if it's prefix, we will sync those labels, right? So then the benefit of that is that then those node restriction labels will show up both on the machine and the node, which could be useful to just link them together as well, like when you just go look at the objects. But it could also be confusing where it's only some set of labels then are synced. Just to throw it out there, not have a preference either way.
Yeah, that's what the second point here was. Sorry if it's not clear enough, but yeah, we could just mix it in with all the other labels that are on the machine. But yeah, like you said, it's not a very clean user experience. Anyone with opinions on that?
Fabrizio?
Yeah, with regards to the arbitrary versus predefined, I think that predefined is a good way to start, and I really would like to get this moving. So we can eventually write the code so we can add arbitrary later to make it easy to arbitrate, but I will start with predefined and just close the set. With regard to where to put the labels, yeah, this is where I mostly debated, because mixing them with the other now it's easier. If I think, for instance, to cluster class, we already have a way to in cluster class to add labels. We don't have to change the API, so it is much easier. And it's also consistent because it allows you to link nodes with machines. From the other side, we are setting, pushing down only a subset, and so it is kind of opaque to see. So I don't have a strong opinion. I think that if we want to get these, having nodes at machine level is the easiest path. But yeah, the UX is a concern.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe as a starting point, we can just mix in the labels, go with option 2 for now. And we can revisit this.
Alberto?
Hey there. Yeah, that's my 2 cents here. Like, my feeling from a UX point of view is, if I wasn't any familiar with CAPI and I look at the API, I think like having this exposed in the template as a new field, like let's call it node labels, whatever. I think that'd be easier, at least to understand when looking at the API. But also, other than that, I think anything would work. And then in terms of reconciliation, I wonder if we okay, we know that we want to propagate the labels at creation when creating a machine deployment and scaling out machines. We want to propagate the labels into the nodes. But is there a real use case for keeping them in sync, like all the time? Like after the node is created, do we have like a real use case out there for changing the labels?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, at least to my mind, that initial sync is important, and the fact that if you remove a label, that node also, you know, the label is actually removed off the node as well, is valuable. Just for consistency's sake, right? Are you thinking just do it once at the start and not just continually keep it in sync?
Yeah, that's what I was questioning.
Sort of what
like,
the kubelet does today.
Yeah. So most of the use cases that I'm aware of for this feature are for cluster admins that wants to, you know, like set labels on a pool of nodes for the targeting particular workloads, right? So that's, you only want to do that at creation, basically. So I was just wondering if that maybe there is no value on being reconciling this all the time. Just thinking out
loud. Yeah, I mean, like I can't think of one off the top of my head either, but it's I guess, is there any reason not to do it though, right? If we're already building out most of the machinery here to put these labels on the nodes, keeping them in sync may not be a whole lot more work, right? And at the very least, it provides this consistency that the user knows that if the label exists on the machine, then I know for a fact that it also exists on the corresponding node. And you know, CAPI will ensure that continues to be the case. Even if, let's say, accidentally user removed it on the node itself, it'll go back and put that label back on it. Or if some other entity was sort of, stepping on these labels, it would keep it in sync.
Okay, do you want to answer, Alberto? If not, then Yasin is next.
No, that's all right. That makes sense.
Okay, okay, good. Then Yasin first, and then Vince, and I'll continue the queue after that.
Yeah, I think that at least there are two values I see with keeping in sync. The first one is actually if you want to do enforcement. So like if someone is operating the clusters and creating the clusters, but wants to enforce labels and topologies, but someone changes something from the workload cluster, then yeah, I'd assume that like they'd want to still enforce those. And the other one is, even if we didn't, like it wasn't in that case, like the operator, I assume that like would still want to interact with cluster API rather than getting the kube config and then making changes. So yeah, I think that like having handling the change case makes sense in those two cases.
Okay, then Timmy.
Yeah, when I was talking to customers about some of the input here, hey, I'm a PM kind of like in this space. When I was talking to customers around some of the use cases that they envision, that workload placement thing was a big one, right? And I think the other one that jumps out to me is with workload placement, like I have some customers that will want to maybe label sets of nodes as like ingress, right? Like where we want to run our ingress workloads. And so that's interesting to me from a security perspective in terms of like what that entails. So ensuring that we can satisfy the use case of scheduling, and then ensuring that nodes that were labeled are appropriately, relabeled in that space seems to be something that like that sort of pushes us towards. But I just wanted to provide that other little bit of detail around like ingress specific nodes as being like one of the targets for this.
Okay, Joe.
From the other side of that same argument, actually, ingress nodes or specific hardware that you might need to have running, have workloads running on specific hardware. There are good reasons to want to remove the label temporarily. For instance, with your ingress nodes, there's something gone wrong with the network. I don't want it to go to this ingress node. I want to remove that label for now. I don't want a controller sticking it back on there arbitrarily. I'm removing it for a reason. Hardware maintenance, you might want to swap out a hot swap a GPU. There's all kinds of good reasons to want to remove nodes, remove labels from specific nodes without worrying that things are going to get undone.
Yasin.
Yeah, I think that like I agree. Those are very much valid, like very valid use cases. I think the question we'd want to ask is that like how do we expect users to drive changes into workload cluster? Is it through cluster API, or is it through interaction directly with the cluster? Because even if we enforce those, technically, if you remove it from the cluster API objects, then there's no controller to put it back because it's basically gone.
Okay, I think Arvinder, back to you.
Oh, thank you. I mean,
first two questions probably. I'm not sure about the third.
Yeah. I was gonna. Well, thank you everyone for that, all that valuable feedback. So number 3, I guess, is the final one. and really it's, you know, like the core maintainers, their opinion would be really valuable here. I think at least in the proposal, everybody said that, you know, this really makes sense at the machine controller level. The machine controller should take ownership of actually doing the label sync. But then that brings up the natural question that if I want these labels to be specified at the machine deployment level, then, you know, I need to somehow propagate it down to the machine where the label sync is running. And two approaches that were mentioned is one is just, you know, the machine controller looks up the associated machine deployment that machine belongs to and finds the labels there. And the other approach would be to somehow just propagate it down. So the machine deployment passes it along to the machine set. The machine set passes it down to the machines that it's carving out. Any opinions on that, or any pitfalls you guys might see in either of those approaches?
I have to drop soon, but so my personal preference would be to use spec template metadata.labels, which is already synced with the machine itself. The only thing we need to test is if that causes a rollout, which I believe it shouldn't, but you know, we should definitely like 100% make sure that it doesn't before relying on that. And like then the machine will just generate those labels. Yeah, we can check. If it doesn't go this way, we could just add like another field to template to see on the machine itself. I mean, that it's in place. So.
Okay, Fabrizio.
Yeah, I have added a link to a doc in our books that explain metadata propagation. And also a note that in cluster topology, we are treating changing labels like a special case, and we avoid rotation when it's not necessary.
Okay, let me take a look at that. So I mean, it sounds like we should utilize this field, spec template metadata.labels. Yeah, let me read into this a bit more. Thank you for the links and the information.
Okay. Anything
All
else?
Right. Nope, that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Then Yasin.
Yeah, just a quick PSA. So I'm stepping down as the CAP-V2 tech lead, and like, yeah, Sagar is nominated. We have a lazy consensus, like that is gonna end up this Thursday. And yeah, I'll still be around being involved with multiple providers and Cluster API.
Questions, comments, concerns? Okay. Yeah, so I think then we're at the end. Any last minute topics? Doesn't sound like it. So, okay, then everyone have a nice day. Thanks for the discussions and see you next week, hopefully.